And we are live. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you from wherever you're joining us. Welcome to this session. And we have two very important guests for today's session. Now, before I go to that, we have some more sessions lined up on this MBA Analytical series. So, let me share my screen over here, and I hope all of you can see this. And also let's get some yeses in the comment section on if I'm clearly audible to all of you, and then we'll bring the host and the co-host for today's session. So the next sessions that we have for our MBA Analytical series is next up is Soumya, and Soumya would be talking about her experience with the NYU Stern application, which is on the 15th of March. The next session is with Mayank, and Mayank will talk about his experience with Berkeley Haas, and also he'll talk about what about the different intricacies that we have for an MBA after 30. He has 12 plus years of work experience. So any of you looking for some similar session like that, do tune in for these sessions. Now, what I'll do is I'll share the link in the chat pod over here, and you can get the full pass for the MBA Analytical series from that. With that, let me just hide the screen over here. Yes, so I was talking about two very important guests that we have today. So the first guest that we have, and who's also going to be our main host for today's session, is Dipinti, and let me just add it to screen. Now, Dipinti is an ex-GMATer, and she has a GMAT 760. She is going to start her MBA with at TAC, and she just got an admit with a very handsome scholarship, and she is going to be the main host for today's session. All over to you, Dipinti.
Thank you, Atreya. Thank you so much for introducing me. Hi, everyone. I'm Dipinti. And let me also introduce you to today's guest and co-host. So I have with me here Rafaella from Brazil, who is an incoming MBA candidate at Harvard Business School. And we have with us here, and I'm sure that she'll share a lot of insights into her applications, her admissions journey. So, thank you guys for tuning in and welcome to the session, Rafaella.
Thank you so much, Dipinti. Thank you all for having me today.
Awesome. So, you have gotten into Harvard, HBS, which is, I would say, is a dream business school for a lot of MBA applicants. And you also have an amazing GMAT score of 730. So tell me today where you stand at. How does it feel, all of these accomplishments?
Yeah, I was telling you. So actually, the first reactions were more like I was afraid or insecure because it's a big, big move in my life, like changing countries, being away from my family. Those are reasons why I hadn't applied before. And last year, I was just like, I'm not going to think about this during the application. I'm going to deal with that if I am accepted. And I mean, I just chose to try to apply in July, so about 2 months before the deadline. And I didn't have huge expectations. Of course, I dedicated myself to do my best and get the best result. But I think that a little bit, I thought that maybe I wouldn't be accepted and I would never take an MBA and that would be it. So when I was accepted, I think for a month and a half, I was just like, what is going on with my life? What am I going to do? And regarding the GMAT, I also had very few time to prepare. But of course, I had high expectations because it's such an important piece of our application. Like, I think I was like 750 was like the magical number in my head, but my marks were way below that. So I think that, the official test was the highest score that I had gotten after maybe 9 marks, I think. So again, I'm a person that for me, like when it's dealing about myself, I put very high expectations. So I think the first time when I saw the result was like, I wanted a little bit more. But then I was like, stop it. I mean, it's good enough. I mean, you can go with that score.
Amazing, amazing. I loved your journey and the way you described your feeling. So yeah, I mean, thanks first of all for joining us here, and I'm sure you'll share a lot of great insights for our audience to take reference from in their MBA applications. So this is how the session's gonna go. So first of all, I'll ask Rafaella about her profile and get to know her a little better, what she has done and what is she currently doing in her job, and how her career trajectory has been. That will also include, say, the reasons why she chose to do an MBA at this point of her career, maybe her short-term and long-term goals and how do they fit into the picture. Post that, we will move into her GMAT journey. We can do a brief about that. And then we will come to her candidacy at Harvard. Which all schools did she shortlist? And, how did she go on the entire application process? What were the factors, the key factors that she kept in her mind? And lastly, of course, we'll talk about important segments of the application. And then after that, we will take over your comments one by one. But you can start posting them from now. So, we'll have them on the screen and we'll start adding them at the end. We'll take it up one by one. Does that sound good, Rafaella?
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Yeah, great. So, coming to the first segment of the discussion. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? Just walk me through your career trajectory. What is it that you have done? Currently, what are you doing? And, all of that. We would love to hear that.
Sure. And I think, my career path is very much related to my personal life. And I think that was a big part of the application, not just telling about my work experience or my education, but also how that related to me, what I like, my life purpose, or my family. And when I was a child, my grandfather had a small farm, and that's where I spent a lot of time. And I think that's where it all begins, because growing up, I became, I already had this passion for the land, for agriculture, for farmers, for nature. And growing up, I started to realize, sustainability issues like energy, climate change, all those things. And that's because I went to agronomic engineering college. That was 10 years ago, actually. That's when I started there. So I moved towns to the countryside and spent like 4 or 5 years there. And I did a lot of stuff during it's hard to know what to do with life when you're like 17, but I always knew that I wanted to save the world, something like that, like do things that are good for our planet, for the people, etc. And agriculture was kind of the way or the industry I chose to do that. So after I graduated, before I graduated, I had a professional internship at Monsanto, a big ag company, which was good to get an understanding of the industry that maybe we don't get when we are studying. But from there, I went to EY, so Ernst & Young, a big four accounting firm. It was good because at agriculture school, you don't get a lot of stuff under, cash flows, valuation, finance, etc. So for 3 years, I could, I had a good career progression. I was promoted every year. I got to lead teams. So I had a bunch of good stories there for the application as well. But then it got to the time in 2018 when I really wanted to deal more directly with innovation, with sustainability, with, agriculture practice. And then I took a short boot camp. A boot camp is a short course from MIT. They had one in Brazil. It was on innovation and entrepreneurship. That really helped me open my head and, think of new things I could do. With that, I joined a startup here in Brazil to work with regenerative organic agriculture, which is a specific type of farming systems that's very much related to climate change mitigation, water cycles, soil health, biology, etc. And since kind of in the time I was doing the application, I also changed a job. So it was a very stressful period. And I'm also in a startup, but it's an American startup. It hasn't even come public yet. We are just beginning our operation. So I'm working from home for 1 year now because of the pandemic. But that's basically what I've done thus far.
Great. I would say that's a very unique career trajectory that you have had. And besides that, I think the variety of experience, I think that makes your application very interesting and unique when we listen to it, even as an audience or maybe even as someone who you're just talking to. So, that brings me to, one of the key questions. And that is, what is it that is very, exclusive about your job? Because from what I can see, you have had a very uncommon profile. So you have worked with Ernst & Young, you have worked with a startup, as you just mentioned. So did you find that these unique factors, played a key role in your application? Were they important? And how did you project it to Harvard or say to the other business schools even where you applied?
Sure. So I would start saying it's a balance, because I couldn't be so unique regarding agriculture that it would sound like I didn't need an MBA. I needed, a master in agriculture. And I actually feel like one of the applications, for the one for Stanford, I didn't get an interview. And looking back, I think that maybe the AdCom looked at me and was like, maybe this girl needs to do an agriculture master and not an MBA. So you really need to balance, this uniqueness, which I think when we say uniqueness, it's, usually people come from strategic consulting, investment banking. I think those are like very common backgrounds. I didn't have those, but you really need to strategically use your uniqueness to show that you're different, that you can contribute to the class, because, I worked at big and small companies. I worked at headquarters, but also boots on the ground. Those were things I could show that I could bring perspective to the case class, to the case method class. But you also need to show that there is a reason why you are doing an MBA and not, something completely related to agriculture. So you really need to balance those things and always connect the dots. I could tell you my story and maybe someone say, yeah, it's unique, but it doesn't make sense because you did things that are so different. But I was able to connect all those and show the reasoning behind all of them, and so it's really your past, and that's even my childhood, your education, your professional experience, the MBA, and your goals. You really need to draw a line there that has its unique points that will make them remember you, but it makes sense for an MBA. So it also needs some common factors, I don't know, like regarding administration itself, like why do you need this kind of education, what you're going to do with the experience.
I completely agree with that. And I think that's very important that you mentioned that it's very important to highlight the unique factors of the application, but it's very important that they all form a sort of a cohesion. So they should just, flow into each other. There shouldn't be, you have just jumped from, say, A to B without any reason. And, of course, that makes a lot of sense. So you talked about, getting into, say, applying to Stanford and MIT. And let's talk a little bit about that timeline when you just started your MBA. You just had that mindset of, say, going for an MBA and just started that. So which month are you in? And, how did you start preparing for GMAT? And what are the schools that you shortlisted in the process?
Sure. So that was the first week of July 2020. And I was just thinking, maybe I should continue to study. And I wasn't thinking of an MBA. I was just thinking, I've been out of school for 5 years. It's important, for our careers and for our lives that we continue to study. So I was really researching for options in Brazil. Like MBAs here are part-time. So it's basically some days at night or maybe during weekends. There are also the academic masters, but usually you need to stop working for those. And then I started looking at maybe Europe, like, again, agriculture masters. There are great schools there. And then in the US, and that's when I came back with the idea of MBAs. I had been in an MBA fair like 3 years before that. And I had kind of quitted the idea when I saw the cost of attendance. I was like, yeah, that's not for me. But then I was like, let me explore this a little bit more. So I started calling people, friends of friends, and see what they thought. And I will never forget that one friend, I told her, I think I'm too young for an MBA. Because in Brazil, people who are doing these part-time MBAs, they are usually much older or more experienced than I am. So I just kind of translated that into the US. I just thought it would be the same. And she's like, you're crazy. You're in the kind of average age, like 27, 5 years of work experience. It's a great moment to apply. It's not that it's the only moment to apply. It's just that I wasn't too young as I thought. So that was when I was, this sounds interesting. So because of the pandemic, I think there are so many online events on MBAs. And I started attending sessions like after work and listening to students. And I was like, yeah, this sounds more and more interesting. I think I'm going to try. And that's when I saw, wow, I need to take a GMAT. I need to take a TOEFL. I need to do an application. And I have less than 2 months to do that for round 1. So, of course, my first reaction was to go for round 2, which would give me 4 additional months, I think. But then a friend who had worked at UI, her husband went to HBS. They were the first people from the MBA world that I talked to. And they were like, Rafa, try to go for round 1 because that increases your odds of being accepted. It's not that round 2 is, not possible, but it's better if you can do round 1. So after that chat, which was maybe the second week of July. I was like, okay, I'm going to try. If I'm not ready, I wait for round 2. So I started studying for GMAT, using free resources. My scores were going down, and that's where I came to e-GMAT after 1 month of erratic study. I went from 2 hours a day to like 6 hours a day because I just didn't have time, in August. So I had the timeline, okay, I need to take the test more or less this day, so the results are ready to go by the application deadline. And you could only take the online test once in August. I think now you can take it more times. So it was really, really a tense period of my life, because on top of that, I needed to do the applications. And as you said, I tried Stanford, MIT, and Harvard. I was only accepted into Harvard. Stanford, I didn't get the interview. MIT, I did get the interview. I don't think I performed well. I was so nervous, and I got waitlisted. So I could decide to pursue that, but the results would come in after April. And I really didn't want to spend more time, under that insecure of where I'm going to go. And that was when I could explore. I had time to explore both schools, compare them, talk to people, and really choose that Harvard was the place for me. But, as I was telling you, I had less than 2 months to do everything. And to choose a school and to apply for it, you really need to connect with the school and understand how it works, the people, the students, the alumni, the faculty members, the classes that you have, the methodology. I don't know. There's so many factors that you could analyze and compare schools. And it takes so long to really understand it, really connect, because at first you just have the stereotypes, right? Oh, so MIT is this, Harvard is that, Stanford is that, Kellogg is that. And I didn't want to stay in that level, but I just couldn't take the time to screen like 12 schools and choose the ones I would apply. So I know that a lot of people have the strategy of target, safe, and reach schools. I think that's the name. I didn't have that. I was just like, I don't think I can dedicate more time than 3 schools. So I just chose the ones that from the webinars, from just Googling stuff, I felt more connected with. So MIT, I had done a course with them, so that was kind of a no-brainer for me. Harvard, I think, is just the first one I thought about, because in Brazil and in agriculture, it's not common at all for people to do an MBA. So I think Harvard is just the university, people know the name of it. So it was like that, like, okay. And then I researched about it. And then Stanford was more because they also have a joint degree with agriculture, which I was interested in. And there were others, like I looked into Yale, I think I looked into Ross, Booth, but I just realized I don't have the time to dedicate myself to so many applications, and you need to tailor your story in each application to make the connection and the fit with the school. So that was kind of it. A really short timeline. So I'll tell you guys, it's possible if you dedicate yourself a lot and have the help of people. I hired a consultant. And the e-GMAT, of course, helped me so much because the platform has all the content you could possibly need. But I wouldn't recommend doing it in such a fast fashion, because it was stressful and it didn't allow me to explore other schools that I could also like. I don't know. I'm happy with my choice and going to Harvard. But I mean, I wish I had the time. I think it's a great time to just explore. I mean, if it weren't for the pandemic, and if I had the financial resources to visit the schools, but just talking to people like who are there or who have been there, I think that's also helpful to connect yourself to those schools. There are so many great options out there. So that would be kind of my say in that topic.
That's amazing. I love the entire journey, and you described it in complete detail, so it'll be really helpful, I guess, for our viewers as well. And guys, if you really want to look at her test strategy and how did she manage to get such an awesome score in a very few, say, days, or even like 45 to 60 days, which is quite less for a 730. Even for a 760, I had to work super hard, and I couldn't really get to a 730 in that short time. So we do have an e-GMAT session where Rafaella has described her complete, the debrief. So we'll put the links up in the comment section so that you can just have a look at it whenever you're free. Right. That's all good. And now you are done with GMAT. You are done with your applications, and say you have gotten waitlisted at one. You got your interview from Harvard. So at this point, I would really like to talk about the Harvard interview, because as we know
Mm,
that it's a little different from the other schools. So what we have specifically heard is that in Harvard interviews, people, they really try to delve deep into your profile, and they do a ton of research about what you have done and
yeah.
say your complete journey. So how did you do that? How did you prepare for this? Did you say visit every incident in your life to sort of get accustomed with this question, and how did you tackle this?
Sure. So I think that, to do my applications, working with my consultant, I already had to go into, this kind of autobiography or self-reflection exercise. So it was kind of fresh in my mind. I remember reading the application a few times in the weekend before the interview. I was scheduled for like Monday morning, I think the first time. And I also would say, when you get the chance to choose your interview spot, because you get the invitation, you get a link, and you schedule your time, I would say, try to schedule it, maybe not for the last date, but give yourself maybe at least 2 weeks of preparation, and try to schedule, I think, in the morning and beginning of the week. I like that because I know I'm more rested. I mean, I'm not in the middle of my work to need to stop and then go back, and the person is probably also rested. I don't know, that was my strategy there. But then my coach, my MBA consultant, she said, you can't prepare for the Harvard interview just because you can't predict the questions you're gonna have. And I think it's a good thing for me because it felt like a conversation about my life. Interviews such as Stanford or MIT, which you're gonna get like, why MBA, why now, why this school, tell me about a time when, blah blah blah. I had practiced so much those questions, and I didn't do well in the interview, that type of interview. I felt so nervous. I was like, if you tell me about a time, my brain just shuts down because, I mean, you just open so many options. And of course, in the interview, I forget all the dozens of stories I had practiced. And Harvard, it's more oriented to you. So it's like how it was to work at EY, how it aligned with your goals. So maybe some questions were hard because I hadn't thought about them, but I could at the time just like wait a second and connect the dots for her. It's really about connecting the dots, explaining why you did what you do or what you did. And also it's a lot about your industry. So I mean, I'm passionate about agriculture and sustainability. So it felt like a conversation about agriculture and sustainability, and I love those. So I just needed to take care not to spend a lot of time on each question because I had so much to say, but it was not a technical interview. She wasn't evaluating if I knew how to do my job, She was evaluating like subtle skills. So the questions were really like in the timeline of the application, beginning like from the top, from like 2015 onwards. And then to the end, it came more different questions, such as my volunteer experience, because I had done that during college, and since then, not so much. So she was like, can you explain a little bit more about that? I remember that the hardest questions for me were like not about agriculture. Like, I think it was more, I really can't remember exactly, but it was like hypothetical questions. So you come into Harvard, it's not an agriculture course. Of course, there are resources, some electives, but overall, it's about a lot of industries. How would you deal with that? How would you deal if you did, I don't know, your summer internship with something else? What would that be? And how would you use it in your career? So most questions were about my past. And to the end, there were more like future questions, which I think are maybe not that common. But yeah, she worked like the challenges about agriculture in the US. How do you deal with that? So I would say you need to know your story, which I think you always need to know your story in your life. Read your application the day before because that's what they have. That's what they have been studying. But also know about your industry. I know people who have been asked, like a colleague from Brazil, he was asked about an IPO on his industry that had happened the same day. So you need to be, reading the news and stuff. Some people might be scared by that. I wasn't, because it's something that I just do every day. So it didn't catch me, like it wasn't a surprise. Like questions, really questions about the industry. How is the industry reacting to this movement? Have you seen something? And as long as you know something to share, you don't need to have a great, super complete answer, but just showing that you are involved in what you do to the point that you know what's going on in the industry, right? I think that's maybe something that you're trying to assess. And she told me in the beginning of the interview that there wouldn't be time for me to ask her questions because she was like, it's all about you. So let's focus on that. But to the end, she did ask me like, were there any questions that you thought or would like that I had asked you? So those are the things that you need to be ready for. So just try not to stall during the interview, like think a lot. You don't need to give the best technical answer. I mean, they are not experts in your field. They're just trying to assess how involved you are. How would you deal in a case method situation? Like sometimes you need to make decisions without having a lot of information. So try to handle with what you have. So for me, it was a great, great experience. I really liked it. I really liked my interviewer. It was friendly. It was challenging, but it was like a nice environment, I would say. I know people have had different experiences, like more challenging situations, like being asked the same thing over and over again to a deeper level. I didn't feel that way. So I think it's really unique to each person. And I did do like 2 mocks before. Of course, the mocks were completely different from the interview, but they were more like to break the ice, I think.
Right, I completely agree with Rafaella. I think it's Harvard has this very unique interview process, and I think a few other business schools too as well. So I think it's very important that we understand the industry that we are working with. So for example, I work with a product industry. So I remember one of my interviews where I was asked that okay, so just think of me as a customer, and I walked into your office, and I told me that. So I told your marketing people that I build this product. So how will you help me customize it? Or what is the extra zing that you can add to my product that will make it more sellable to, say, industry or in the market? So yeah, I mean, it's very important that you are good at your job. That I would say is super important for every person who's applying to these business schools. It's very important to know your industry and your work. Yeah, so great response, Rafaela, and I completely agree with that. Right. So you also touched a little about, I think, your MIT boot camp, if I remember correctly from your answer, right? So I think that was some sort of an extracurricular and community experience that you have. So would you like to talk about that? Was it, say, an important aspect?
Yeah, I think so. So definitely, that was something my consultant said. I told her my whole life, everything I've ever done, and she was like just helping me pick the things that would be important in each school application, and it's not the same. She was like, for this school, I think you should highlight this. For this other school, maybe that. But anyhow, so MIT was kind of this extracurricular / educational experience that showed, I think it was great to connect the dot because it was the turning point from me working at big companies for me working at startups. So in my story, that gave a super important context, right? It made sense. I made a transition point. And of course, it was a great experience with great people, international experience. Connected me very well. I think for the MIT application, it was even more important, but for the others as well. But more than that, I did a lot of volunteer work during college. I also think that was important. It was a big part of my application because I didn't do volunteer work 10 years ago to get into Harvard. I never thought I would apply to Harvard. I did it because I think it was a good thing for me, for the people, a good learning experience. I could, I had time, I could help people. Why not? And I think this is something they might be looking into people, like this kind of proactiveness or community service. So definitely important. Other than that, I even used some personal life examples of more like community engagement. What else did I use? I think it was basically volunteer activities. Like travels for work, I worked in Guatemala for a while, I worked in Italy for a while. I think those are very good. If any of you guys have, any work experience abroad or maybe
international volunteering experience, right? Yeah, that's bang on. Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's a good one. But maybe, I don't know, if you can travel because of the pandemic or because of financial reasons, there are other ways to engage with international experiences, even in your country. Like maybe people from abroad coming in and you're helping them somehow. So try to look of ways to engage. For your life, I think it's not because of the MBA. It's so good for our souls to help people. And in the end, it does help you with the application. I just would say, I had 2 months to prepare, right? So let's say that I had never done anything extracurricular or community. And then I do just something to put in the application. I think that's not a good way because it will sound very, very fake, right?
I have really met people like this, so there are some, and even we have this mindset, right? So we are going into an application, we need to do everything to get it perfect, and perfect includes community experience. So why not just go and quickly do some community experience for 3 months just because it adds to the application? But I don't think it works.
Yeah, I mean,
it defeats the purpose.
If you're preparing for longer, I think it's okay. Like if you have 1 year, I know a friend from Brazil that she had 1 year to prepare and she started doing a volunteer work that made a lot of sense and that helped her. I think if you have time, I think do it because it's going to be good for your application, for your life, for the people. But I mean, if it's like 1-2 months before, I think it will sound like weird.
I completely agree with that. It'll be weird and awkward and it wouldn't serve the purpose. I mean, they can just see through it that you did this just for the application and not because it was in the larger interest.
Yeah.
Right. Amazing. Awesome insights. And I completely agree with all the points you mentioned. So, let us move over to your application, say the Harvard essays specifically, because I think they require a lot of introspection. And I would like to know how you went along with that. So Harvard has this essay question that, as we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School program? So how did you tackle this and how would you advise people to approach this question?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is that all essay questions were so hard for me in the beginning. Like it seemed like the question was looking at me. I was looking at the question. It was like, what do you really want from me? I don't know. So that was when, researching the internet, there are great free resources. And then again, I had a consultant to kind of tell me, this is what they mean. This is the type of essay that we do accordingly. It was really about my life. So, when they say, what more would you like us? Maybe the first reaction that I had, should I put something here that I haven't ever mentioned in the rest of the application? Because there's not much left. Like, I watch Netflix. Is that it? It was not that. So it was really about my life. So my childhood, which was something that I think was not covered in the rest of the application. And then really connecting the dots. That was the place I had to connect the dots because the resume is just bullet points. It doesn't make sense. Why did you go from UI to startup? Why did you do that? It's the place for the whys and connecting the dots. So it was really my childhood, my education, one volunteer experience I explored during college, and then how that connected to my first job, how that connected to my second job. It's really like giving context to the interviewer. Of course, I explored stuff that was in the resume, like a great point for my resume that I wanted to elaborate on. But other than that, I try to explore more like the stuff I did or what mattered to me in that sense. And then, of course, that's the place you need to say, what is your goal? So what you're going to do after the MBA, connect it with what you did. And then with the past and the future, you need to say why you need an MBA. So in the end, it's like, give context to your past story, connect it to your future, your short and long-term goals, and then say, why Harvard? Why an MBA? How are you going to contribute to the class? What you're going to do with it? And then try to close with a great statement of how all of this connects and it's going to help you. I don't know. For me, it was really about sustainable agriculture, etc. The people, food security. I think those were the things that I explored, but it should be related to your own story.
Right. So this had no word limit, if I'm correct. And that can be super dangerous and it can be super intimidating as well. So if you remember, what was the word limit that you tried to stick to? Did you have something in mind?
Yeah, I remember that. So again, I asked my consultant because no word limit doesn't really mean no word limit. You don't want to send a book. They don't have the time. They are reviewing thousands of applicants. So you need to balance, how much space do I need to tell my story, and but also keeping it summarized to show that I can be summarized and also respect our time. So I think I had like 2 pages. Amount of words, I'm not really sure, but I think my consultant said like 600 is short, but if you can do it, it's okay. 1200 is a good spot, and maybe 2000 is like your upper limit. And I was thinking like two pages. I was also thinking like the design. I think if the person gets 2 pages, they can read it. If it's more than that, I was like, maybe they will get intangible feeling that this is too long.
Right. Right. Yeah, makes sense completely. And I think that it's very important to remember this as well. Let's come to the second, essay question. And I think it's a very interesting one. So it says that, Harvard looks for a habit of leadership, analytical aptitude, appetite, engaged community leadership. So, I mean, it sounds intimidating, like a lot of words strung together. But I guess it has a lot of meaning. And how did you approach this question? Did you say give leadership examples from your past, and what did you highlight in this?
So that's something, again, that my consultant helped me with, because you're not going to say, I have a habit of leadership because X, or I have analytical aptitude because of this and that. It's not that literal. It's like more subtle. You just need to think. I did a lot of notes, right? So it was like, which stories that I'm going to put into my applications are going to show that I have a habit of leadership. So I had led people in UI, but I hadn't led people in startups. Startups are crazy in that sense. I mean, they are not as structured as a big 4 in terms of, career or not career, but like titles, So I could use the UI like a formal leadership experience, but then at startups, it's more like a leadership in a way that you are proactive. You see a problem, you go there and solve it. Even though I was not leading a team, that shows leadership. I think that the volunteer work, again, it shows the engaged community leadership, because you're doing not for money, you're doing to help people. So it's not the only way, like volunteer activities, but I think it's a great way to show community leadership. And analytical aptitude, I think it's a little bit about the GMAT probably. But also, I am an engineer. I think that helps in my case. But you don't need to be an engineer to do an MBA. Again, I don't know exactly what the AdCom thought, but that was kind of my thoughts. Like GMAT, I'm an engineer. I have good grades because they do see your transcripts from college. I've been working with finance, so I think finance is also relatable to analytical and stuff. So yeah, I think that's it. It's really subtle. You need to review and think, does someone who doesn't know me reading this will gather stories that prove that I have these traits? But you're not at any moment saying, I'm a leader because of this. I mean, you could do that, I think, but I didn't do it. It was really more like knitting a story, really.
Right. And, as Rafaella rightly said, for analytical aptitude, GMAT is definitely they use standardized tests. But, right now we can see that in 2020, GMAT has been made optional in a lot of business schools for application. So in that case, I would say that I attended a few Dukes and other schools webinars, and the AdCom specifically mentioned that you can take analytical courses, take up a finance course and take up, say, a bunch of analytical courses on Coursera and just submit the grades. It should show, and especially if you're coming from a non, analytical background, say we are both engineers, but then there could be some people who are coming from different backgrounds, and that would really help in that case.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yes, right. So, so quickly we'll take up the last, the last segment, and it's very important, and then we'll move on to comments and questions. I think there are a bunch of questions that are coming up. So, I think this is a very crucial aspect of the application, and even I had faced this, and that is recommendations. So we are good with essays, we are good with interviews, but then when it comes to letters of recommendation, it is suddenly, I would say, it's a severe, some people think of it that people are not approachable. So first of all, tell me, how did you approach people, and who were your recommenders specifically?
Okay, yeah, I think we can't say enough how important that is, because it's the only moment in your application that's not you speaking about yourself. Because you could lie and put a great story, but then you need two other people to come in, or one other people to come in and kind of reinforce those traits, or add new stories that you haven't told, and that shows the habit of leadership, for example, or the analytical aptitude. So those traits, they can come in from the letter of recommendation as well, for sure. So what I did, and I don't think I had a hard time finding my recommendators, because I've always had good relationships at work, not just professional, but I always end up becoming friends with the people I worked with. So I chose one person from each job that I had. So I had full-time jobs at the moment, EY and the startup. So I asked one letter from my former EY manager, so my direct supervisor, and another one from my direct supervisor at the startup. I could have asked to the startup CEO because he had been my direct supervisor before. But I thought that, someone who was at the moment working with me, probably had a little bit more time availability, was a better choice, because they always tell, we don't want to talk to the CEO, we want to talk to the one that's really close to you. So maybe if they saw the CEO, they might even think, maybe they are not that close, that kind of thing. So what I did was I called them several times to tell, I'm doing this. Can you help me? And they're like, sure. But then again, I just had 2 months. So I reached out to them like really early in my process, because you need to give them time. You need to give them time because they have their lives. They're going to tell you they're going to do it next week. They're not going to do it. You're going to ask again. And they are going to say, next week I do it. And then they're not going to do it. So the challenge is that you need to manage their time. And as we were friends, it was good. I think if I were not friends with them, it would have been harder, because I really needed to call them every week and say, have you done it yet? Please, I need this. I really need this. If you don't do this, I don't have an application, And but I called them not just to, every week to follow up, but in the beginning, I had an honest conversation with them, like, this is why I'm doing this. This is how my application looks like. So we discussed the stories, because they have to answer, I think, 4 questions. And my consultant had like a prep material that I could send them with the questions and explaining how you do a letter of recommendation. But I also told them, this is how my application will look like. So I would love if you could tell, I don't know, I would actually ask them, what story do you think we could use to help me? And they're like, this and this. And we would kind of discuss so they could write by their own. But, I knew that their letter would help me by either bringing in new information or a new story, or by reinforcing something that I wanted them to reinforce. An example, I was actually leaving my job, and my supervisor knew that, and I was afraid that, adcoms would think it's weird that I'm leaving my job during the application. Like, is she actually getting fired and she's just not telling the truth? So I asked him, the last question is like, is there anything else you want to tell us? Something very open. So I asked him, can you please, when you do that, mention that I'm changing my job, and, so they know that, it's real. So if you have any weak spots, or I didn't think it was weak, but I think it could be interpreted like that. So I just asked him, can you please explore that? Leave your recommender, open to do whatever he wants with the letter. It's his letter. But if they are open enough for you to discuss what you're doing and how the letter is important, I think it helps, because you can do that letter. That's for them to do. But I don't think it's wrong for you to align on the stories, or, how your application looks like and how important their letter is. It's super important, guys. I mean, I can't say enough. I think if they see a nice letter of recommendation that's not just full with good stories, but it's also like, it shows that they like you or something like that. If you can get to that person, I think that's important as well.
Absolutely. I do agree. And I think that, what she mentioned is that everything should be, say, corroborating to your story. It shouldn't be direct contradictions, and it shouldn't just say other things about you that you haven't mentioned. So that's super important, that you are in line with them, and they are also in line with you. So they think that whatever you have asked them to write, they agree with that. So yeah, don't burn bridges, and get good letters of recommendation.
Exactly.
Amazing. So I think we have covered a lot of stuff. So thank you for answering all the questions, and I think we can take up a few of the comments. So we still have about 15 to 20 minutes, and I would like to take up one by one. Okay, so I think the first comment is by Yashodhra. So Rafaela, would you like to take it up?
Sure. So, what were the tricky interview questions which were asked, and how did you prepare for the interview? So, let me begin with the second. So, to prepare, again, I always keep saying the consultant, Sarah, but she was super helpful. I had some written materials to prepare, like write down some answers, think how I would answer them, like really general stuff, not for Harvard, for any interview. That was where I began. And then she was like, for Harvard, it's hard to prepare because you don't know which questions are going to be asked, but I did do 2 mocks just to break the ice. And then, of course, I read my application before the interview. They send you a super nice video 24 hours before the interview from 3 current students just saying, you can do this. I was there 1 year ago. And that was also helpful, like listening to songs and just getting to the right mood. I think that's important because you don't want to get there like super tense and nervous. You want to be like the best version of yourself. So listening to music also helped. The tricky interview questions, I didn't feel that there were many of them, but maybe the hardest ones for me were like, what would you do if you did a summer internship that was not with agriculture? What would that be? Industry, company? And that was something that I definitely had not thought about because for me, it's all about agriculture. But then she wanted to test me probably if I were flexible and probably trying to have like a question that I definitely hadn't prepared for. So that was the one for me, but it probably will be different for each person.
Great. So I hope it answered your question. Let's move forward with other questions. So, which consultant did you hire? Yeah.
Sure. So her name is Eileen Lollis. So ELLIN LOLIS. She's American, but she actually lives in Brazil. So I don't know, a friend referred her to me, and I really liked her because she's such a nice person. And as I told you guys, I had like 45 days from the day I hired her to the day of the Harvard deadline. So she was helping me, keep the pace of the application because it's a lot of work, guys. It's a lot of work. So if you can take the whole year, like now it's a great time to start preparing. You have like 6 months. I think that's also good. And yeah, but she was also like helping me not freak out because of the tension and the stress. So that's why I really liked working with her.
Amazing. And I think, yeah, the question just follows by the same person. What are the mock interviews and how did you arrange this? Again, it boils down to your consultant. Anything extra that you would like to add in case of the mock interviews? Like, how did they go about?
Sure. So mock interviews are basically training sessions. So it was either my consultant or someone from her team. So I kind of hired mock interviews. You pay for the hour, I think, in my case at least. I think there are some cases that's kind of an all-in package. And this person is going to pretend to be an adcom, and they are going to ask the questions, and then they are going to give you feedback, which is like half a... like in the beginning, I kept looking to the sides. I don't know why. So that was one feedback. Like you need to look to your interviewer, or you took too long to answer that question. You need to be more succinct, or don't talk about this. Like weakness questions. Those are tricky. I didn't get those, but I mean, what's your weakness? And you don't want to say like something that's gonna ruin your chances. You want to say something that's smart. I don't know. So mock interviews help you to prepare, make mistakes, correct those mistakes, feel more comfortable with the flow. And again, I just hired my consultant. I don't know if there are any kind of free services, but probably places like GMAT Club Forum, there are people who are like, I would do a mock on you, you do a mock on me. Those could be helpful as well.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, the next question is about your GMAT prep and how much scores were you getting in your mock tests?
Sure, I have it written down. Just a second. That's a story that I almost picked out. So my first GMAT was 600. My second was 660. The third one was 660 again. My fourth one was 620. That's when I hired e-GMAT because I was like, my scores are going down. I need help. And then 620 again, and then a 720. That was 2 weeks before the official test. 1 week before the official test, 680, and I was like, I need to be above the 700. That was my feeling. 2 days before the official test, 700, and the day of the test, 730. Those are kind of my track records.
Wow, and you have it written down. You've recorded them. That's amazing.
I had everything that I did every day, like how many hours, what did I study? Because otherwise I would forget what I was doing. Like I ended up doing like 3 weeks of sentence correction. Those are super hard for me. So
yeah. Right. And I think the next question is about a different job sector. So, someone who wants to say probably switch careers. So, before Rafaella answers, even I can add a few points here. So, an MBA, so there are basically an n number of reasons why you get into an MBA. And one of them could be to pivot into a different career, right? So say you're coming from something else and you want to go into consulting. But then, as we discussed earlier, it should flow in. So let's just say you are a primary school teacher, just an example, and then you want to get into investment banking and it doesn't make any sense, right? So always, because not only the MBA admissions, guys, it's the job and the companies who will also ask you the questions that, why this job and, why this particular career path and how do you think you'll contribute? So do think about all of those before you think about pivoting. But yes, definitely an MBA is a way to pivot into a different career role.
Yeah, for sure. Depending you answered the whole question. That's not my case, so I can't explain a lot about it. But I do have a friend who got into Harvard, and she's from like the cosmetic industry, and she wanted to go into either consultant or private equity, I think. So it did work for her. As long as you can connect the dots,
yes,
I think it's fine.
Yeah, that's super important. Yeah, so this question is for you, Rafaella.
Okay, did you have low phase while preparing for GMAT? How did you do with low feeling, security, no motivation? Yeah, I mean, it was terrible when my scores were going down. I remember like crying and like, I'm not going to do this. Oh my God, I hate this test because, I mean, I felt I was getting better and the scores were getting worse. And I was like, what is going on? So guys, GMAT has that. I mean, it tries to break your spirit before you cross the line. So I think I was just like, I didn't have a choice. I need to try for round one, so I'm not gonna give up. I mean, I studied every day. Every day. I didn't take any breaks on Saturdays and Sundays. Again, I don't recommend it. I mean, I stopped doing exercises. I don't recommend anyone doing that, but it was my way of dealing with, I don't have time. I want to try this. I don't know if I want this, but if I want to try, I'm going to try, 100% of what I can give. So I kind of tried not to think a lot about the insecurity and the motivation. Of course, I was feeling those things, but I was just like, I need to focus. I need to do this mocks today. I need to study this on e-GMAT platform today. So I was just like trying not to feel my feelings. Again, don't recommend it, but that's what I did.
Right. So did you reach out to any alumni of the schools that you applied?
Yeah, that was the first thing I did actually beginning of July. I tried to use LinkedIn and, friends of friends. And you need to do a few cold calls probably, but try to reach out to people that have any similarities to you. So I tried to reach people that I know were into agriculture, because otherwise, even Brazilians, I tried to reach Brazilians, and people have a lot to do. They probably receive a lot of messages like the ones I sent. So not everyone is going to answer. But I think one person from Stanford was super helpful. One person from Harvard. I don't think from MIT, it was more like my connections from the MIT bootcamps, which were alumni from Sloan as well. So yeah, do reach your alumni, because that helps you understand if the school is a good fit for you or not, and get the sense of what it means to do an MBA there.
That's super important, actually. I think she nailed it. And yes, LinkedIn is one of the ways. And as she mentioned, always try to say, don't just reach out to random people and don't send out, say, 20 messages to 20 people and expect that they'll reply to you within a day. It's very important that you strategize it properly. Say people who know, like she mentioned, they are in your targeted career path. Say they want to be into consulting, they want to be into agriculture or tech. Then reach out to such particular people. You can get the info from the schools, clubs. So they have specific clubs for that. You can just reach out to people accordingly. And don't expect that everyone will reply to you. They are busy people. They have their own schedules. So yeah, have patience, but it's super important to connect.
Yeah, and I would say that, when I was thinking about applying, very few people answered. When I got the interviews from MIT and Harvard, more people answered because I had a bigger connection to them and they wanted me to succeed. And after I was accepted to Harvard, I've talked to so many alumni because the schools help you connect. And after you are there, kind of everybody starts to answer. So it's just part of the process.
Exactly. That's a very I would say it's a very philosophical and rhetorical question.
Yeah, fear of rejection. So again, as I told you guys, it was not something that I had prepared for my whole life. It was not the biggest dream of my life. It was just something happened inside my soul. I don't know. And I was like, I'm going to try this and I'm going to give my best, but maybe it doesn't work. So I think I had that position. So maybe that made the fear of rejection a little bit lower. I think I started to feel it when I was waitlisted from MIT. So it was not fear of rejection. It was a feeling of rejection. So when I didn't get the Stanford interview and when I got, waitlisted from MIT, it was the feeling of rejection. It was really hard. I mean, and I feel so silly because instead of celebrating that I had been accepted to Harvard, I was like, oh, I was waitlisted from MIT. I'm not good enough, etc., etc. And I mean, you can feel that feeling, but you probably should say, shut up feeling. I mean, this doesn't define who I am. Being accepted to an MBA or not doesn't define who you are. Maybe you need another year to prepare. I don't know. Maybe it's not what you are going to do with your life. There are so many ways to be successful and happy. MBAs can be a way or not. So that was how I dealt with it. It was less a fear and it was more like the feeling. And yeah, it just felt sad, but then you need to move on.
Right. So I think we have the next question. So do you think I have to answer all official guide questions and at least 4 mocks? So I mean, take it up, but I don't know. I would also like to say that it's we cannot quantify in this way that you have to take at least 4 mocks or at least 2 mocks or at least 3 mocks, right? What do you say, Rafaella?
Yeah, it's really hard to quantify. I would say that 4 mocks is probably too few because 4 mocks you're still trying to understand the timing and the way of GMAT. It takes some time and all official guide questions. I didn't do that. I don't think you need to do that. I ended up using more the e-GMAT course, but it's good to try with different sources if you have the opportunity. But again, it's really hard to quantify. I think the quantification piece comes from the results you're getting from your mocks. If you feel ready or not, it's going to depend so much on each of us. So this is a hard question to answer, but I would say you don't need to do all official guide questions. At least 4 mocks seems, I think you did more than 4 mocks. I did like 9 mocks, and I would like to have done more if I had time. I did one a week. I think once a week is a good measure. Do it in the weekend so you have time to correct and provide feedback to yourself.
I agree. Mocks are super important. Right. So, what would your advice be to someone who has just started working and aims to get into a good B school a few years down the line?
Okay, that one is hard because when I started working, I wasn't thinking about those stuff, but I don't think you need to be thinking of getting an MBA to be a great person at your life, personal or professional. Like I don't want to sound like those kind of advices of how to be successful in life because I have no idea. I mean, I'm not an expert. I don't think anyone is an expert on that. There is no secret. There is no bullet, like silver bullet or anything. It's really personal. But I would say, try to seek opportunities where you can be a protagonist because you're going to need to tell stories like, I know, I participated. participated is not a good verb because you need to show what you did, right? I led, I did, I wrote, I don't know, something more like that. So something that you can be a protagonist and that has an impact, like save the company $1,000 or increase profits by, those stuff are going to go into your resume. So try to seek those opportunities to lead people, to be active on projects, to have an impact, because you're going to need those stories. Try to have some community engagement outside of your work, or maybe even your company offers some volunteer project or something. I mean, English is super important. I think nobody talks about it, but I mean, it's not my native language. A lot of people don't speak English, so practice that as much as you can. And yeah, live the life you want to live, and you're going to connect that to the MBA. Don't do something for the MBA, I would say. Do for you, for your family, for your friends, for your work, or something like that.
Amazing answers, Rafael. I think we'll wind up the session now. I hope we have answered a lot of questions. So we do have a lot of upcoming sessions, and you can I think you can see them on the comment section. I think Atreya is adding them. Yes. So yeah, we have the full session plans here. You can see there's a link to that, so you can go there and you can see all this upcoming sessions that we have. Just register so that you do have it in your calendar and you can just join in on the day. We have some webinars also, like CR, and there are always webinars on in every week. And Atreya has also posted the link to them. There's algebra, there's CR. So yeah, go for it and just look at the links and register for the session. So thank you, Rafaella. Thank you so much for being here. So would you like to say something before we conclude?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dipinti and the e-GMAT team for the opportunity. I hope this was helpful to some of you. I wish you all the best luck. And if any of you watching this live or maybe afterwards speaks Portuguese or some Portuguese, I have a YouTube channel about, it's especially for Brazilians, but if you speak Portuguese, you can watch it, regarding MBA in Harvard. It's called Harvard Ella. So it's basically Harvard and the end of my name, Ella. I'm just thinking, it's such a tough process. I didn't know much about it. I learned so much from so many people, and I hope I can help other people that are interested in that get the help they need. So good luck to everyone, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Have a great day, great night, great afternoon, and great evening. Bye.
Bye.